Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Tech World Human Skills podcast. So for this episode, we're going to do something a little bit different. I've invited back Ben Caird, who was guest, I think, on episode 20, and we're going to do a bit of a Q&A session. So I posted out there in the world, and I've been speaking to people, asking them what sort of questions that they might want on the pod, and so we've got some questions in. So we're going to talk about those today. So in case you haven't listened to episode 20, Mr. Caird, could I get you just to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. Ben Caird, I worked with your good self in Microsoft a few years ago. I work at Access today, and I've had 25 years or so experience from a technical background, but now sort of leading large support groups around the world.
Okay, brilliant. So we'll start off, we've got some questions. First question, Ben Caird, why are you so brilliant? And that one's coming from your mum. We've also got some questions on WhatsApp that we really shouldn't. I don't think we can read out on air. We're not going to answer those questions either. But we did get some sensible questions as well. So I'm going to start with one of the more sensible questions, if that's okay.
Yes.
Because we're very sensible people on a very sensible podcast.
It was nice that my mum sent that in there. That's good. That's good.
So the first question I've got, so given it's Mental Health Awareness Week, which it is, so as we record this, I think we're on Friday the 17th, it is actually Mental Health Awareness this week.
Yes.
So given it's Mental Health Awareness Week, what does that mean to you, and how do you think about mental health? Mr. Caird?
Right, that is a very big subject. And one that I'm not highly qualified to answer. However, I think the first side of that really is about other people, and I think the key thing there is to listen and to understand, really. And I think different people have different challenges in life at different points. I think the important thing is to listen and understand, and make sure that they're okay, check in with people and all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
Not an expert, but that's generally my approach with these things. Of course, I've experienced lots of folks in my teams over the years, and I think we probably see it a little bit more now, sort of with COVID and post-COVID. It seems to be a bit more acute. Maybe that's the awareness side, which is great, and of course this week really helps. I think the big thing is obviously to talk about it and not have it as a taboo. I think probably the area I can talk a bit more to is my own sort of personal sort of side and experience, which is more just to do with well-being, I would say, and sort of just making sure that I'm sort of mentally strong and resilient. And so there's a few things I think about, really. Life, I think broadly is about balance. And so there's things I do that are around fitness or well-being that I think have really helped me. Anybody and there'll be a few people perhaps maybe won't watch this, but are on LinkedIn that do know me. Go back 3 or 4 years, and I'd only ever been in a gym to go to the bar. But I think something clicked, and I'm pretty consistent now, going to the gym 3 times a week. It's a morning thing, get up and get out, and that's something that gives me a lot of energy through it, particularly the days I go. But I think that's really helped. And then I think around sort of mobility is the other thing. So because I'm sat at a desk far too much,
and getting older,
and there is some truth to that. But I think just getting around and moving. So it was last year, the January, I decided that I was going to do an average of 10,000 steps a day, but measure it, because I like to measure things on a monthly basis. So some days I can't get there, but in January I'll make sure I got 310,000 steps, for example. And so I'm now in month 17, having done 16 months in a row. So that just helps drive me. Sometimes it means I have a bit of a busy weekend with 20,000 steps. Sometimes it means my children get dragged out and they're less keen, but they get out and we get walking. So I think that those things help, right? It's almost like a mini meditation in a way. Maybe put a podcast on, maybe just take in your surroundings, get out and get walking.
Yeah.
And I think it's those types of things for me. And it's a bit like when you're on, the safety on the aeroplane, put your mask on. I think if you can be kind of grounded and make sure you're looking after yourself, it allows you to look after your family and your work colleagues and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I'm sorry. Carry on.
Well, I was going to say, what about you?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So I was thinking of. We did another podcast actually. I did another podcast with a lady called Alison Sinclair, and she talked about mental fitness, and
Right.
I really like that idea because I am in no way qualified with the term mental health.
Yep.
But mental fitness, a bit like you were talking about.
Tricky question for the two of us, really.
yeah. Well, it's a bit like you were talking about with physical fitness, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're physically ill, right, you need to go to the doctor, you need to seek professional help, you need help. If you have got a really strong body that is a really fit body, then you are going to be more resilient, fit in a literal fitness sense,
Right.
not handsome. If you've got a healthy body, then you are more likely to be resilient when you're in that illness, when you go through that surgery, whatever it might be that you're going through. And I think that applies really nicely to the brain. So there is definitely mental health where you need real help.
Yeah.
And then there is this idea of mental fitness, where there are things that you can do every day that help build that mental fitness.
Yes.
And I think about that. So I see that in two ways. Firstly, my own, trying to constantly build my own mental fitness. The other place I see it is I spend a lot of time talking with people and coaching people about presentations, public speaking, high pressure meetings, that kind of stuff, where actually it's exactly the same set of skills. If you have got good mental fitness, then when you find yourself under pressure, you're able to fall back on those techniques.
Yeah.
They really help you. And the idea, the really good example I always think of is footballers, right? Missing penalties. All footballers can kick a ball 12 yards, and you've got kids that play football.
Yeah.
All of them can get it in the goal from 12 yards away, right? But you get to the World Cup final and people blaze it over the bar because of that mental fitness and that dealing with stress and dealing with pressure. And so a lot of those, I think, those mental fitness techniques, and I always like a little framework for everything. Like you like to measure everything. I like a way to remember everything. So I always think ODERM: optimism, diet, exercise, recovery, and meditation. And so if you're being a bit optimistic about things, and I'm not so good at the diet part, but if you're eating healthily, not drinking loads of alcohol, all that kind of stuff, regularly exercising, bit of recovery, being a professional rugby player, they seem to just be professional recoverers, and then a bit of meditation really helps, so that when you're then in that really high pressure situation, you've got a good level of fitness and you've got some tools and techniques that you can sort of rely on to help you get through.
For sure. And I think that, I guess there's a couple of things I picked out. The main thing I picked out from there, and I think it was Jimmy Carr I heard, that, there is a difference between, being mentally ill and feeling sad. And I think some of what we're talking about here is on
feeling
that
sad, not depression.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think it's, these things won't help people where they're really ill and they need to see the professionals. But I think in terms of like the hustle of life and trying to balance all the things and the pressures that go with that, maybe these are helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good chat. Well, let's go to the next question. What else have we got? Do you go for a question this time?
How about this one? We got somebody that's about to go through a recruitment process.
Oh,
have you got any tips?
Yeah. There's loads of jobs I haven't got. So I've got a big list.
So that's a lot of learning.
So that's a lot of learning. Okay. Honestly, there are lots of jobs I haven't got. There are lots of jobs I've got. And also, I have hired loads of people. Back in my Microsoft days, I can't even tell you hundreds of people that I've interviewed for various technical jobs, pre-sales type jobs, management jobs. So lots of those. Let me just think a couple of things that maybe spring to my mind. First thing, and this is a great little tip. Lots of people might already know it, but the STAR technique. So somebody asks you a question. I have been in some really waffly long answers where they've never got to the point really. The STAR model is brilliant. So STAR, again, I like a nice way to remember things. Stands for situation, task, action, result. So somebody asks you a question and you answer it by saying, this is the situation I was in, this is what we were trying to achieve, this is how we did it, and this is how I did it, and these were the results. Just a lovely way to kind of think about it. The other thing, and I got this tip, I forgot who gave it to me now, but it was this idea of thinking through all the really good things that you've done in your career, all the interesting stories where things were difficult, there was a project you succeeded with, one you failed with, and just go and make a note of them in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And just make a note of them as you go and put them in that STAR format. So this was the thing that happened to me. Mm-hmm. And also then go and tag it and think, actually, this story now is about resilience, or this story is about conflict, and it might have multiple tags, or this is where I failed, or this is where I succeeded.
Kind of the competent, the tag is the competency that someone might be interviewing against.
That's it. So they might ask me a question like, tell me about a time where you failed, and the example you've got might also be the tell me about a time where you had conflict. So if they were to ask you, tell me about a time where you had conflict, it's the same story because both of the things were part of it.
Just slightly turned for the audience.
That's it. Yeah. And so then you've got all of these things as they happen to you in life. You just tag them up in a spreadsheet in a nice little format, and then revise them before you go. Well, when I say revise them, just run them through your brain so you know roughly how you're going to say them. Not memorised and scripted and artificial, but just I've got that one about resilience.
Line item 4 in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, exactly. And it really helps.
Yeah, distill really, your point, right?
It does. Yeah. What about you? Any tips? I'm sure you haven't got lots of jobs.
You're not wrong. I guess interesting. Maybe our audience will decide. That when you were talking about your examples, so when I think about jobs and interviewing, really I'm looking for a candidate to kind of de-risk my choice of hiring them.
Okay,
if that makes sense, right? Like. And what I mean by that is, can they prove that they can do it? So have they got proven capability is the way I think of it.
Yeah.
Or if they haven't got proven capability, have they got the aptitude, right? So sometimes you need somebody that's close to the finished article. Sometimes, in an area you can take a bit of, they think about it the right way and they can hone their skills here, I think. And the examples you were giving there is actually you're showing your proven capability through lived examples, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, and the STAR model is something that I use. I think I can talk about it better than I can apply some of these things, right?
Yeah.
But I think for me, that's it. Like, think about what you've done and why you're relevant, and then think about your gaps and be quite open about, well, actually, I haven't done it in this setting, or I haven't done that particular thing.
Yeah.
I often think about when I'm looking for people in particular roles, I think about the competencies and which ones are like non-negotiable and which ones, particularly when you're building a team of leaders as well, where you actually want different strengths and you want that diversity of thought and capability. So I think top tips are really probably understand what the job is.
Yeah.
Understand. I think the other thing is to try to, if you can, understand as much about, if it's an internal role, get a coffee, go and ask people what they're like, nice open questions. What are your top 3 problems? What are you trying to solve? Tell me a bit about the role even. But I think just you can do that. When it's an external role, maybe you have to look through LinkedIn, look through different things. Yeah. Maybe you can have an informal catch up.
Yeah,
shouldn't be. I think if someone's being proactive with me as a hire, as somebody that hires quite a lot of people.
Yeah,
proactivity is like one of my go-to capabilities or competencies, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I mean that is one of the foundations
so
of leadership.
The very fact that they're doing some research and trying to reach out to you is helping them.
One, some of my favourite questions: how did you prepare for today? That type of thing.
Yeah.
When I do my roundup of all the candidates, what 3 things should I remember about you and why?
Yeah.
I think like you with your presentation, with a lot of the work you're doing with your customers or clients, you're thinking about what you leave people with, and how they feel. And I don't think that should be overlooked in an interview as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. You were talking there about, being honest with your strengths and your weaknesses, the areas that you're great at and the gaps. I remember years ago, earlier in my career, getting asked the question, when have you failed at something? And I genuinely couldn't think of anything.
Right.
And I think of me then. And then later on in my career, when I was doing a lot more interviewing, that became one of my stock sort of questions. When have you failed? And the reason that I love it so much, and actually didn't get that job when I couldn't think of this thing, is because I want to hire people that know what they're good at, know where their gaps are, and have got examples where I tried this thing, but it didn't go right. And therefore, I've now learnt something from that, and now I'm a better person because of it, as opposed to somebody who thinks or feels that they've led like the perfect life, never got anything wrong, therefore not needed to learn anything from it, because that's where you make all your real learnings, is when you fail at stuff.
Yeah, I mean, self-awareness is key to development, right? So, yeah, very much so.
Good. Right, quick time check. I think we're doing all right for timing. So, next question. How did you get your first job in management? And any tips to help someone get their first manager role?
Great. That is a good question. So I got my first, so we're really talking about people management, right? Because I always think there's lots of leaders.
Yeah.
We're talking about people managing. So I was really lucky at Microsoft, and I had an external mentor called Neil Crofts, who was great and worked with a lot of people at Microsoft, I believe. And I was in a session with him talking about, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be 3 years, 1 year? And I said a crazy sentence, which was, I'm just waiting for the right manager job, right? And then I sort of heard that back, and that I mean, that's, I'm not taking control, I'm not being proactive. Like, everything about that sentence is wrong. And so what that actually in the end led to was I built like a small business case to create a back then it was a BPOS before Office 365, but a BPOS and Azure team that would create some proactive services for the Premier customers. So I put that together, and kind of long story short, needed kind of a few people, 6 people. I did need to try and get the best and brightest from across a sort of 1,000-person org. And so I needed to not only build that kind of case, but then I needed to go and speak to the kind of country leaders or regional leaders to get a level of buy-in, and then got it approved, and then went through and hired a few people into that and created some great services. So did that for a couple of years. So that was how it happened.
So interesting. Me. So you crafted a role that didn't exist, and I remember we were working in a similar team at this sort of time.
Yeah,
and so there wasn't the job. So you talked about hiring people that are proactive a minute ago, and you're kind of saying, actually, I was sat there waiting for a job that didn't exist.
Yes.
And then went, actually, what about if I craft what this job might be, and then go and get some sponsorship from some people?
Yes.
And so how did that work in reality? How did you go from, I've got this idea, to there now being a job? Who did you have to speak to, and how did you sell it to them?
Yeah, so without getting into all of the, so there was, let's say there were 6 regional leaders in EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa. One of them was my boss. I had a mentor who was on that leadership team as well that looks after Western Europe.
So 2 of the 6 you've already got a relationship with.
Yeah, and then I basically got some coaching and some feedback from my boss initially, then from my mentor, got some level of kind of buy-in at that point,
Yeah.
and then essentially had one-on-ones with each of the other leaders
Yeah.
to talk about kind of what I could deliver and what I've always called like clear contracting. I'm not talking about anything legal,
Yeah.
but like if I do this and you do that, are we good? You know, and what does that look like and how can I help? Because in simple terms, I wanted to take some of their best, or at least one of their best engineers from each of those regions to bring a team together.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, leaders don't like to lose control,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because they want to, you know, to have it in their span of control so that they can have the broadest control and therefore impact. So had those conversations, and then I sort of presented it to the boss of the whole group at that time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it happened.
Yeah.
But I think it's often people go into a big meeting and they haven't necessarily got enough people aligned beforehand.
Okay.
And it can very quickly get out of control. I've seen that. I'm sure you have over the years.
Okay.
I tend to.
So you'd had conversations before the meeting happened. The public conversation. You've had little side conversations.
Yes.
To make sure that you understand people's perspective and you've influenced people's perspective before you got into the big public discussion about it.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, without, again, there's loads of detail and some of it's a bit hazy because it's quite a long time ago now. But yeah, and you understand their objections, and then you say, okay, if that's your objection, if I do this, you know, and so there wasn't loads of objections, but there was, you know, what does that look like, and how can you drive it, and then in that case, they were then the sponsors for the role. So then I would have monthly check-ins and then show progress and all that good stuff, and make sure that I was readying. Part of it was about creating these, if you like, intellectual property, these services, but part of it was then about training the people in their region so that they could then deliver on that.
Okay.
So it was quite relatively easy over time to train the people and deliver it and show the results. So,
yeah.
But yeah.
God, fascinating. Taking control and creating your own job.
Yes, yeah, and I think it's, you know, it won't be like that for everybody, but I guess if we've got a moment, the other side of that is, so for example, where I am at Access today, we just in my area we've just promoted 3 individual contributors, if you like, into their first team leader roles at the company in the last sort of pay cycle, if you want to think of it that way. And so really proactive is what I look for. So those individuals had expressed interest already. They were leading their teams. They were go-to people. They came with solutions, not problems. Do you know what I mean? They were driving and they were bringing people with. And I think the big thing I look for if you're going to lead, if you're going to manage people is, can you lead people and will they go with you when you're not their boss? Because I think that's quite important, right? I think sometimes if you're looking for your first role, maybe you think when you get a manager title that people will listen to you, and that's a fallacy. It's very much about being able to lead people and get to a shared agreement and move forward as a group, right?
Yeah, being able to communicate a great idea. This is a way forward. Get a bit of energy behind it, and then get some. Make sure we get some results from it.
Yeah,
and you can do all of that without having to be the authoritative line manager of that person.
How can you work with and through people, not do to people? Is how I think about that.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, so so I was a people manager for, I'm not now, but I was for probably about 11 years, something like that. And mine is probably a bit more like that example that you've just given in Access Group. So I decided, ready for the next challenge, been doing the pure technical thing for quite a long time, the customer facing technical thing, enjoying it, but wanted the next challenge. And so I remember, firstly, I applied for another team's people manager job for a different department. Didn't even make it to interview.
Right.
But what it did do is it kind of put a line in the sand with my boss and right, hey everybody, I'm applying for jobs. This is something. I'm being intentional about. So that was quite useful. Then probably after I think I got together a bit of a personal development plan to help me kind of build some skills. A job came up being a manager in the team that I was in, the department I was in, applied for it, didn't get it.
Right.
So I'm good at not getting jobs. But what I did get then was some feedback, on these are the things that you need to think about. And actually, I got told I gave a good account of myself, but there was a better candidate. So it wasn't that I or a more suitable candidate. Is it a better candidate?
Yeah, that's a better word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get that. But then by this point then there was a really clear line in the sand. This is the way I want to go. I've got a bit of a development plan. So then my leadership team started giving me a few extra bits to do, and I remember I was almost then like a team leader of some graduates that came in, and I kind of some graduates joined us, and I sort of built their development plan, helped them on board, and they had a proper manager, as it were, but I was there sort of helping in a semi-leadership kind of way.
Right.
And then another job came up, managing my department, and I applied, and probably because I'd done a bit of sponsorship management, because I'd had a personal development plan, because I'd worked through it, because I'd had some success doing it, then I was a much better candidate for my first management job. And ultimately then somebody decided to take a risk and went, going to your point, I've not got the proven capability, but you've shown an aptitude, some enthusiasm, and we're now happy to kind of take that risk.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Getting your first people management job. If you've never been a people manager, you can't get that complete proven capability, but you can get adjacent capabilities, transferable capabilities, and then you're able to kind of show people those.
Yeah, lots that you've covered there. The development plan is an interesting one. Development plan doesn't have to be some incredible thing, does it? A development plan can be build relationships with these people, read these books, learn these things, work on a couple of different projects that stretch you in different ways, right? It's, I think the reading books is a little bit transactional, but it still shows, particularly if it's your first role, some of those things are appropriate, right? They are a good thing to do to kind of broaden, to show that you're proactive and you're trying to develop yourself, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, good. Well, I'm looking at the clock. I reckon we're about done. And so I want to say to everybody that sent in the questions, thank you very much. And it'd be great to get your feedback. If you like this kind of format, a bit different to normal, let us know and we can get some more questions and answer sessions. So final thing for me to say, Ben Caird, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Ben.